The Cleveland Browns defense was a wrecking crew last season. Top 3 in passing yards allowed. Myles Garrett playing at an MVP level. A coordinator running one of the most feared schemes in football. And now, total silence. Jim Schwartz might be gone. The staff is in limbo. And nobody knows what happens next. But here's the thing, this isn't just about one man. This is about the entire identity of a defense that carried his team when the offense couldn't get out of its own way. So buckle up because we're about to break down every angle, every candidate, and every scenario that could define the Browns' 2026 season before it even starts. Let's be real. Jim Schwartz walking away wouldn't just be a loss, it would be a gut punch. This guy took an already talented roster and turned it into a nightmare for opposing quarterbacks. His system worked. His players believed in him. And the results speak for themselves. But respect doesn't mean you sit around forever waiting for someone to make up their mind. According to Mary Kay Cabot, there's still a shot Schwartz returns. The defensive staff was expected to stay intact. Continuity seemed like the obvious path forward. But then Todd Monken opened his mouth, and everything shifted. Now don't get it twisted, Monken didn't throw shade. He was just honest. He said he didn't come to Cleveland to chase Jim Schwartz. He came to coach Myles Garrett and this roster. That's a head coach setting the tone. That's a man who respects what Schwartz built, but isn't going to let his entire offseason hang in the balance while waiting for one decision. And honestly, he shouldn't. The combine is coming. Free agency is around the corner. The clock is ticking. If Schwartz wants back in, great. But if he's hesitating because he's still salty about not getting the head coaching job, then the Browns have to be ready to move on. Here's the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to say out loud. If Schwartz comes back while still bitter about losing out on the top spot, are we getting the same fire? The same intensity? Or are we getting a guy who's half in, half out, and secretly interviewing for other gigs the moment the season ends? That's the risk Cleveland has to weigh. Because bringing him back only works if he's all in. Anything less than that, and you're just delaying the inevitable while wasting a year of this championship window. So let's talk alternatives. If Schwartz walks, who steps up? One name that keeps getting tossed around is Zach or the Ravens' defensive coordinator. And I'm going to stop you right there. This would be a disaster. Yes, Monken has a Baltimore connection. Yes, he's pulled talent from that organization before. But Zach Orr's 2025 season wasn't just bad, it was a complete meltdown. Baltimore went from elite to mediocre overnight. In 2023, under Mike McDonald, they were the #1 defense in the league. In 2025 under Orr, 18th. They gave up 122 explosive plays, over 20 yards. Quarterbacks were lighting them up left and right. Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, Malik Willis, Aaron Rodgers all had career games against that unit. You don't bring that mess to Cleveland, not when you've got a top 5 defense already in place. Monken might trust Ravens guys, but Orr should be nowhere near this conversation. Now, here's where it gets interesting. What if Cleveland went completely off script and brought in someone who actually shocks the league? Sean McDermott. Yeah, the former Bills head coach. 65% career win rate. Multiple deep playoff runs. A defensive mastermind who just happens to be available. Most teams aren't calling him because all the head coaching jobs are filled, but what if he's willing to reset his career as a coordinator? What if he wants to prove he can still dominate on that side of the ball before taking another head coaching shot? Cleveland would be the perfect landing spot. He'd keep this defense elite. He'd bring instant credibility. And he'd send a message to the entire AFC North that the Browns aren't playing around. Would he take it? Who knows? But if he's interested, the Browns should be sprinting to his doorstep. But let's get to the most logical move, the one that makes the most sense for everyone involved. Promote from within. The Browns have 2 in-house candidates who could step into this role tomorrow and keep the machine running. First up, Ephraim Banda. This guy has been coaching the safeties since 2023, and ever since he arrived, the Browns' pass defense has been locked down. 164.7 yards per game in 2023. 167.2 in 2024. That's not luck. That's elite coaching. And it's not just Cleveland noticing. The Jets interviewed him for their DC job. So did the Cowboys. When other teams are trying to poach your position coach, that tells you everything you need to know. Banda knows the system. The players respect him, and he wouldn't need a learning curve. He could walk into that role on day one and keep everything intact. Then there's Jason Tarver. If Banda's the rising star, Tarver's the steady veteran. He's been with Cleveland since 2020 as the linebackers coach, and he's got prior DC experience with the Raiders. This isn't some unproven coach getting a shot in the dark. Tarver has been instrumental in developing some of the best players on this roster. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was playing at a Pro Bowl level before his injury. Jordan Hicks was a revelation. Devin Bush had a career resurgence nobody saw coming. That doesn't happen by accident. Tarver knows how to get the most out of his guys. He's got the respect of a locker room, and he's already embedded in the culture. If Schwartz leaves, Tarver might be the calming presence this team needs to avoid any kind of drop-off. Here's why those two names matter so much. Monken has already said he's not changing the system. He said it directly. We're built for the system they're in currently. My anticipation is we're not going to change it. That's not coach speak. That's a clear signal that whoever takes over this defense needs to keep the same aggressive, attacking mentality that made them elite in the first place. Banda and Tarver both fit that bill perfectly. They know the scheme. They know the players. And they wouldn't require any kind of dramatic overhaul. This isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about keeping the wheel spinning at full speed. Now, let's talk about the long shots. Steve Wilks. You remember him, right? Browns DC back in 2019 during the Freddie Kitchens disaster. That season was a train wreck, and while Wilks has had stops in San Francisco and Carolina since then, the idea of bringing him back feels like a reach. Monken was on that same staff, and he's been pretty open about how dysfunctional that year was. Unless every other option falls through, this doesn't make much sense. Then there's Joe Woods, another former Browns DC. Woods ran the defense before Schwartz, and while there were some bright spots, the consistency just wasn't there. He's available, and sure, he knows the system, but bringing him back would feel like a step backward. The defense made a massive leap under Schwartz. Why would you risk undoing that progress? And then there's the fantasy pick. Kirby Smart. Monken worked under him at Georgia, and thinks the world of the guy. Kirby's got nothing left to prove in college football. Multiple national titles. Total control in Athens. A recruiting empire. Is he leaving all that to become an NFL coordinator? Absolutely not. But hey, if he ever wanted to test the NFL waters, Monken would be the one guy who could tempt him. Still, let's call this what it is. A pipe dream. Here's the reality. This decision affects everything. Free agents are watching. Current players are watching. Leaders like Myles Garrett and Denzel Ward had tight relationships with Schwartz. If he walks, the emotional impact could ripple through the entire locker room. Monken needs to either keep Schwartz or bring in someone who commands instant respect. That's why Banda and Tarver keep coming back into focus. They're not flashy. They're not headline grabbers. But they're respected, they're known, and they wouldn't disrupt the foundation that's already been built. Monken is an offensive guy. His focus is fixing the Browns' inconsistencies on that side of the ball. He needs a DC he can trust to run the defense without constant oversight. That's what made Schwartz so valuable. But if he's gone, that trust has to land somewhere else. And Monken isn't going to gamble on an outsider unless he's absolutely certain it's the right fit. That's why internal promotions feel more and more inevitable. Let's also not forget the free agency implications. If the Browns want to keep this elite unit together, they need clarity on the coaching staff now. Players want to know who they're suiting up for. Continuity matters. This defense finished top 3 in passing yards allowed per game 2 years running. You don't mess with that unless you absolutely have to. And right now, the only reason to mess with it would be if Schwartz decides he's out. So here's where we're at. Waiting. Waiting on a decision from a passionate, fiery coach who may or may not still be upset about losing out on the head job. If Schwartz comes back, the Browns are locked and loaded for another dominant defensive season. If he leaves, the safest and smartest move is promoting Banda or Tarver and keeping this machine humming exactly the way it did in 2025. Anything else risks disruption during what should be a championship window. And the Browns can't afford to waste a single year of this roster's prime. If you want more breakdowns like this, hit that like button and subscribe to Browns Breakout so you never miss an update. Drop your pick in the comments. Banda, Tarver, McDermott, or someone else entirely. Who do you want calling the defensive plays in 2026? Go Browns!